Reborn, I returned to the day my husband died, and this time, I let him drown. My brother saved my childhood sweetheart but lost his own life to the freezing North Sea. Later I married that sweetheart, Arthur, and we shared a life of mutual devotion for 40 years. He dedicated himself wholeheartedly to me and my family. Yet on his deathbed in the NHS ward, he confessed to me that he had actually made a suicide pact with his one true love. He resented me and my brother Harry for his entire life. I've been reborn, and this time I couldn't care less if you live or die. 1. Someone is drowning. The water off the Cornish coast was murky, and wave after wave crashed in. The scene before me was all too familiar, so familiar it made me tremble. I stood on the pebbly beach. The just hung-up distress call to 999 still clutched in my hand. Soon, the thrum of the RNLI lifeboat engine and the distant wail of an ambulance siren filled the chilly air. My fingers are ice cold. It was just like this in my past life. My brother Harry dove headfirst into the churning waves to save Arthur. Arthur was pushed ashore, but Harry was swept away by the rip current, never to return. We were 17 that year and my brother had just turned 20. Later I married Arthur and we spent 40 years together in a quiet suburb near London. He was always attentive to my wishes and exceptionally dutiful to my parents. Everyone said that while the Kemp family had lost a son, they had gained a son-in-law who was even better than a real son until his final days with late-stage cancer lying in his hospital bed. He was so thin he was just skin and bones. I held his hand, my tears long since spent. He looked at me, his eyes devoid of warmth, filled only with a lifetime's worth of venom. Eleanor Kemp, do you know why I married you? Because your brother saved me. I had to repay the debt. He gave a laugh. An ugly twisted thing. But do you know why I jumped into the sea that day? I suddenly didn't dare to listen. But his words stabbed at my heart like a knife. Chloe and I had a suicide pact. But your brother had to meddle and pulled me out. Chloe thought I'd gone back on my word. She resented me for the rest of her life. He took a breath and stared at the ceiling tiles, and I resented you and your brother. For the rest of mine, I let go of his hand. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of tenderness and care. All of it was a lie. It was all just a long, drawn-out act of repayment. I watched him take his last breath, and my heart turned to desolate waste. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing right here, the beach from when I was 17, a chaotic rescue scene, the briny scent of the sea washing over me. I had been reborn. I dug my nails hard into my palm. The pain sharpening my focus. Thank goodness I managed to get Harry out of the way by saying I desperately wanted a 99 flake ice cream from the van up the hill. I was prepared to let that perfect couple have their tragic end. But before the lifeguards arrived, I saw someone else dive recklessly into the water towards Arthur. I couldn't just stand by and watch an innocent person die for nothing. So I alerted the lifeguards immediately. Now the rescue boat is closing in. Its crew straining to reach the figure thrashing in the sea. 2 people. It was Arthur and the man who saved him, Leo. A suicide pact. What a joke. Where was Chloe? Soon, both of them were rescued and carried, dripping wet, onto the beach. Paramedics crowded around to examine them, and I slowly walked over, standing on the periphery. Arthur coughed up some seawater, hacking violently as he opened his eyes. His gaze swept over the crowd before settling on my face. In that instant, I saw the overwhelming fury and utter disbelief in his eyes. That was not the look Arthur gave me when he was 17. That was the look Arthur gave me when he was 57. Right before his death, he had been reborn. 2. He shoved the medical staff checking on him aside, struggled to his feet, and staggered toward me, dripping wet, his face ashen. Eleanor Kemp. He ground out through clenched teeth, each syllable dripping with venom. Did you call the lifeguards? I looked at him calmly. What else was I supposed to do? Who asked you to interfere? He snarled, his voice low. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined everything again, just like last time. Oh, so he came back after all. I just don't want any more innocent people to die because of someone else's foolish suicide pact. My tone was cold as my gaze swept past him, landing on the boy behind him who had just been rescued and was now sitting on the shingle coughing. The boy, Leo, looked up, his face still pale with shock. He glanced at me, then at the agitated and furious Arthur, looking somewhat bewildered. Arthur shot me a fierce glare, then scanned the crowd for Chloe's figure, but couldn't find her. He took a deep breath, turned back to me, and said in a tone dripping with condescension, "Eleanor Kemp, let me make this clear. This time, I won't force myself to be with you just because of some debt of gratitude for saving my life. I love Chloe, only her. Give it up." He was waiting to see me cry, to see me look at him with the same single-minded devotion I had in my past life. And all I did was let out a soft, indifferent "oh." Then I stepped around him and walked straight over to the boy sitting on the ground. I crouched down, pulled a packet of tissues from my pocket, and offered it to him. "Hey, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" The boy took the tissues, wiped the seawater from his face, and shook his head. I'm fine, thanks. Was it you who called for help?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Be more careful next time. Rip currents off this coast are really dangerous." He was about to say more when a muffled sob came from beside him. Chloe seemed to appear out of nowhere, throwing herself into Arthur's arms. She clung tightly to his waist, burying her face in his soaked chest, her shoulders shaking, so she had been watching from the shadows all along. She must have been too afraid to show herself last time. After things had turned deadly, Arthur's body stiffened for a moment. He instinctively raised a hand to return the embrace, but his gaze involuntarily flickered toward me, a look of guilt on his face. I turned my face away, focusing intently on the young man before me. After the paramedics checked him over and found he was fine, they told him to get some rest. Arthur had his arm around Chloe's waist. He watched my calm profile and realized I hadn't spared him a single glance in that moment. A look of surprise appeared in his eyes for the very first time. 2. The sound of the ambulance faded into the distance. Chloe accompanied Arthur to the local hospital for a checkup. Before leaving, he glanced back at me with a look too complicated for me to bother deciphering. My parents and Harry arrived at the beach quickly. My brother, still holding a slightly melting ice cream, pulled me into a hug so tight it made my bones ache. "You scared me to death, Ellie. Are you okay, love?" His voice was still trembling. "Thank goodness. Thank goodness you didn't jump in to save Arthur." "No way," I immediately retorted. "You like him so much. Who knows if you'd act on impulse." So, in my past life, it was because Harry knew I liked Arthur that he risked everything to save him. I leaned into my brother's embrace, breathing in the clean scent of Purcell on his clothes, and tears began to fall. Alive, warm, my breathing, living brother. In my past life, this embrace had already turned cold by the time I was 17. It became a black and white photograph on the mantelpiece, a name carved on a headstone in the village churchyard, and a hole in my heart that could never be filled. "Harry," I choked up, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm so glad you're okay." My mum walked over and patted my head. "Silly child. What are you talking about? Your brother didn't go into the sea. He went to buy you an ice cream. Come on, let's go home to the cottage. We shouldn't come to the beach for the next few days." My dad's face was grim, too. "What's going on with Arthur Yates?" "He's worrying his parents sick." Back home, the four of us had a quiet dinner of fish and chips. They were still shaken up talking about the incident. While I shut myself in my room, unfinished A-level physics revision was still spread out on the desk. A neatly posted revision timetable hung on the wall, and the crude clay model Arthur and I made together in primary school sat on the windowsill. Everything exuded that unique, innocent feeling of being 17 inches Britain. But I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I had come back to life. I had returned to a time before the tragedy began, carrying 40 years of memories and the desolate sense of a lifetime spent deceived, wasted, and resented in a loveless marriage. Arthur had returned as well. He hates me. In our past life, he hated Harry for meddling and saving him. And he hated me for shackling him for a lifetime with duty. In this life, he hates me for meddling again and saving him. How pathetic. I opened the very bottom drawer of my bureau and took out a biscuit tin. Inside were no biscuits, just some faded birthday cards. A few sorry vouchers Arthur had written for me after childish squabbles and a handful of old photographs. 4-year-old me and 4-year-old Arthur sat side by side on a garden swing, ice lollies in hand. I was eating slowly, and a drop of juice fell onto the back of my hand. Just then, Arthur leaned over and stuck out his tongue to lick it. Arthur's mum, holding the camera, pressed the shutter, capturing that funny and intimate moment. Childhood sweethearts, innocent and inseparable in the English countryside. This was once my most cherished memory. I only found out later that his heart belonged to someone else. To him, all those little moments were just a burden he had to bear. I put the photo away. I won't look at it anymore. The next day at sixth form college, it was the talk of the common room. Word about the rescue at the beach had spread and there were all sorts of versions floating around. Some said, Eleanor bravely called the Coast Guard, while other rumors suggested Arthur and Chloe had a suicide pact like something out of Romeo and Juliet. During break time, Arthur walked into the form room. His face was still pale. His gaze swept across the room, lingering on my face for just a moment before quickly looking away, cold and distant. Chloe followed him in, her eyes slightly red and brimming with a pitiable fragility. The room fell silent for a moment with all sorts of glances darting between the three of us. I didn't look up, just kept revising my English literature vocabulary cards. Eleanor, my desk mate Sarah whispered, nudging my arm discreetly. Are you okay? You must have been terrified yesterday. Is it true that Arthur and Chloe? I'm fine. I cut her off. I don't know anything about them. My tone was so flat. It even surprised me a little. Sarah was taken aback. Probably not expecting that reaction from me. In the past, I was always the one who cared the most. Whenever Arthur was involved, the bell rang and Mrs. Davies walked in carrying a stack of mock papers, announcing a surprise test. I took a deep breath, pushed the chaotic thoughts aside, and picked up my fountain pen. In this life, all these grudges and entanglements can just step aside. I need to first grasp onto something solid, something that won't betray me. For example, the A-levels I've neglected for far too long, like my brother, whom I almost lost, like my own life. As the pen glided across the paper, formulas, and essay structures forgotten for decades, after 40 years of settling, became startlingly clear, the gears of fate. The moment I forcibly wrenched them in a new direction on that beach, began to mesh anew, turning with a completely different sound. In that single glance between Arthur and me, the 40 years of feigned tenderness and genuine resentment that lay between us shattered completely. All that remained was a floor of sharp cutting debris, waiting to see who would be the first to get hurt. 3. In the days after my rebirth, I deliberately avoided any path where I might cross Arthur. I started using the side entrance instead of the main gates to get to college. Stopped fetching tea for him during breaks and chose netball and cross-country instead of watching rugby practice just to be near his team. I heard he's been avoiding me too. Good, less hassle. In the mock exams of the first term of upper sixth, my grades quietly climbed from the middle of the pack to the top 10 inches my year. My parents were pleasantly surprised, and Harry ruffled my hair, saying, "My little sister's finally buckling down." Only I knew that this was bought with 40 years of regret and hard lessons. At the Sunday roast, where both families gathered, Arthur's parents also praised my noticeable improvement. They brought up our old tradition of going skiing together in the Scottish Highlands over New Year's with a smile, asking me which resort I wanted to visit this year, maybe Aviemore again. In years past, I would have already looked at Arthur, with shining eyes, trying to guess his preference. Right now, I was looking down, replying to Leo's WhatsApp message. He was explaining a solution to a complex maths problem, and I happened to have tried another clever approach. My thumbs flew across the screen as I typed. "Eleanor, love." Arthur's mum called my name gently. I looked up, a lingering smile still on my face from the text. "I'm fine with anything. I'll go along with your plans." With that, I naturally lowered my gaze and went back to typing. A brief silence fell over the dinner table. My mum chimed in with a laugh. "Trying to smooth things over. This kid, she's been glued to her phone lately. If her A-level grades hadn't improved, I'd have thought she was addicted to social media. Arthur, sitting across from me, paused his knife and fork. He heard my brief, sharp laugh at a message. He pressed his lips together, then spoke up. This year, I'd like to bring Chloe along. She's never been skiing and I want to teach her on the cairngorms. The air froze for a moment on the roast beef. My parents' smile stiffened and Arthur's parents also looked slightly awkward. Everyone knows about that unspoken understanding between the Yates family and our Kemp family and that I've had a crush on Arthur since we were kids in wellies. Bringing another girl on a family trip sends a pretty clear message. Harry frowned and was about to say something over his Yorkshire pudding, but I gave him a gentle kick under the table. Sure, that sounds fine, I said, lifting my gaze. My eyes swept past Arthur before settling back on his parents. The more the merrier. And Chloe from our year is really sweet. We'll definitely have a good time. My reaction was too natural. No shock, no sadness, not even a flicker of surprise. It was as if he hadn't just said he was bringing his first love on our traditional family holiday, but was merely asking if the gravy tasted good. Arthur's fingers tightened slightly around his cutlery. I knew all the words he had prepared to deal with my tears, my questions, even my anger were now stuck in his throat. He looked at me, his eyes holding a deep confusion, and a flicker of annoyance at being so thoroughly ignored. The atmosphere grew subtly tense during the latter half of the meal. The adults scrambled to keep the conversation going about the weather and local news. Arthur had fallen silent, occasionally glancing my way, each time I just happened to turn to talk to Harry or look down at my phone. My screen lit up with a funny meme from Leo. A Highland cow tumbling into a snowdrift. The caption read, "Heard you're going to Scotland. Test out how much the thistles hurt for me first." I couldn't help but let another small smile curl at the corner of my mouth. "Who are you texting?" Harry asked me. "It's that guy I helped at the beach last time, Leo." I said, "He's an Oxbridge applicant at our college. His parents even came to our house in person to thank me and gave me a hamper from Fortnum and Mason." Across from me, Arthur's fork suddenly clattered to the plate with a sharp crack. "Tooks," I shot him a glance. "Clumsy. Can't even hold a fork steady." I hunted for that set in John Lewis. It's a matching pair with the knife I'm holding. Well, accidents happen. As expected, Arthur brought Chloe along on our Hogmanay holiday trip to Aviemore. The girl was wearing a brand new white ski jacket, her delicate face glowing against the fluffy fur trim of her hood as she stuck close to Arthur's side. I dropped off my luggage in the lodge, changed into my salopettes and jacket, and headed straight for the nursery slopes. In my past life, I was a decent skier, but it had been years. I needed to get my feel for the snow back. Arthur was nearby with Chloe. He was teaching her patiently, his hand on her waist, speaking in a gentle murmur. Chloe would let out little shrieks now and then, shrinking into his arms. Even as he shielded her from other skiers, his gaze kept drifting my way, seemingly by accident. I put on my goggles, tuning out the commotion over there, and focused on adjusting my skis, mentally reviewing the key points of shifting my weight for a parallel turn. After a few runs down the gentle slope, my muscle memory slowly kicked in. I still took a few tumbles in the powder, but it was no big deal. I was having a blast in the crisp Scottish air. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Arthur trying to come help me a couple of times, but Chloe kept him occupied. It was fine. I could get up on my own. At noon, we had lunch at the mountain restaurant. The long wooden tables were packed. Chloe sat next to Arthur and quietly complained that her hands were cold. Arthur naturally took her gloved hands in his and began to warm them, completely unfazed by the watchful eyes of both families and myself. I was sitting diagonally across from them, discussing with Harry whether we should try the red runs that afternoon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a lunch photo from Leo, a steaming plate of haggis, neeps, and tatties from a pub back home. "Are the restaurants at the ski resort overpriced and terrible? Sending you some virtual comfort food for the soul." I laughed and replied, "You nailed it, £15 for a bowl of soup, but the view of the loch is amazing, so I'll put up with it. Yeah, hang in there for now." I'll take you out for a proper Sunday roast when you're back. He replied instantly, what kind of roast? It's the kind of meal with extra crackling you'll remember for the rest of your life. Our messages went back and forth. Not exactly frequent, but every time I looked down at my phone, a smile would tug at the corner of my mouth. Who's that? Harry suddenly leaned in. His tone teasing, spill it, are you secretly seeing someone? You're always grinning at your phone like a Cheshire cat. His voice wasn't loud, but a sudden hush fell over the table. All the adults turned to look, their eyes full of curiosity over their mugs of hot chocolate. Arthur's movements halted as he turned to look at me. My face grew slightly warm. Not from shyness, but from quickly assessing the situation. This was an opportunity, a chance to make everyone, especially Arthur and his parents, fully understand that I had shifted my affections. So, I lowered my gaze, feigning a hint of flustered embarrassment at being found out, gave a slight nod, and said in a soft yet clear voice, you could say that. Really? My mum exclaimed with delight. Do I know them from around town? When are you bringing them home for tea? Mum, it's still very new, I mumbled evasively. Besides, most parents would be worried about A-levels right now. Why are you so happy about it? Of course, I'm happy, my mum said, casting a seemingly casual glance towards Arthur and Chloe. Your grades have been getting better and better, which means this person is a good influence. Hearing this, Arthur's expression didn't change, but his jawline tightened visibly. Chloe nestled against him and asked softly, what's wrong, Arthur? It's nothing, he said, averting his gaze towards the window. That night after soaking in the lodge's hot tub, I was walking alone down the timber corridor back to my room when someone grabbed my wrist from behind with a strong grip. I was startled and turned around. Arthur stood in the shadows of the corridor, clad only in a thin dressing gown. His hair was damp and his eyes were inscrutable in the dim light. His chest rose and fell slightly, his breath carrying a faint scent of whiskey. Eleanor Kemp, he demanded. Who are you seeing? I tried to pull away, but he held fast. His grip on my wrist was painfully tight. What's it to you? I said with a displeased look. Is it that Leo guy? He ignored my question and pressed on, his tone growing more urgent. Is it because you saved him out of gratitude? Paying a debt? Don't be naive. That kind of feeling won't last past university. His words pricked me like needles, yet strangely they made me want to laugh. Arthur, I stopped struggling and looked him straight in the eye. What right do you have to question me like this? He froze. Do you think I should be just like last time? Clinging to your side with blind devotion in the village. So you can always find me when you turn around. Waiting until your deathbed in the hospice to finally throw me a scrap of the truth. Wake up. I'm even less willing to repeat that mistake than you are. And who I choose to love is my own business. Even if he's doing it out of gratitude, at least he's doing it willingly. Arthur's face went pale in the dim light. He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came out. In those blue eyes I once knew so well. A storm of shock, humiliation, and inexplicable panic swirled. It was as if he suddenly didn't know me at all. I wrenched my hand from his grasp and turned to leave. No footsteps followed me from behind. Only the wind howling outside could be heard, whispering a low, mournful sound as it swept through the Scottish glen. 5. After the holiday, I threw myself into my studies with even greater determination. My contact with Leo also became more frequent. At first, it was mostly to ask about homework problems for maths and physics. But later, we began sharing snippets of our daily lives, griping about the college canteen food and complaining about mock exams. I realized that Leo and Arthur were two completely different kinds of people. In my past life, I organized revision notes for Arthur countless times. He'd take them, rarely saying thank you, at most just ruffling my hair awkwardly. After a rugby match in the mud, I'd hand him water. He'd gulp it down, shove the empty bottle back into my hand, and turn to joke with his teammates. He had a sensitive stomach, so I'd get up early to make porridge, bring it to school in a thermos. He'd eat it as if it were his due. Occasionally complaining, "It's a bit lumpy today, Ellie." My efforts went completely unappreciated. I used to be clueless, thinking I wasn't good enough for him. Now I see the truth. His gaze was always fixed on Chloe's retreating figure across the quad, but Leo was different. I casually brought him a tin of Marks and Spencer shortbread as a souvenir from a day trip. The very next day, a neatly compiled outline of Oxbridge interview materials appeared on my desk. I just mentioned in passing that I always struggled to catch the key points in French listening exams. That weekend, he had already sorted out categorized listening materials for me from the BBC and French radio. From slow news to common exam dialogues, even including versions with his own recorded explanations in perfect French. Give this a try. Intensive listening plus shadowing. Stick with it for a month. If you don't see any improvement, I'll treat you to Nando's for a whole month. He said it so casually. But as I looked at those meticulously organized files, I felt a lump in my throat. After his early offer from Cambridge came through. He had loads of free time, yet he spent most of it on me in the library. He claimed he was here to get the full immersive experience of upper sixth, but in reality, he was just my free tutor. My maths mechanics module was weak, so he broke down typical problem types for me. One by one, when I was stressed and frustrated with a past paper, he never got angry. He'd just take my pen and say, "Take a 10-minute break. Let's go get a Kit Kat. Let me tell you a stupid story from my further maths class." He remembered that I hate coriander, that I get hungry at 3 p.m., and that I can't sleep before an exam. His kindness was thoughtful, considerate, and never overstepped British reserve. I didn't do well on my first physics mock, and was feeling down. After college, I didn't wait for anyone and left by myself. Halfway home, it started to drizzle, then pour without an umbrella. I stood alone under the eaves of a Tesco Express, lost in thought. Through the curtain of rain, someone came speeding over on a bike and slammed on the brakes right in front of me. It was Leo. He wasn't wearing a waterproof. His hair and blazer shoulders were soaked and he was panting heavily. "Why aren't you picking up your phone?" He jumped off the bike, thrusting the dry umbrella into my hands while wiping the rain from his own face. "My phone was on silent in my bag," I murmured. He understood the pressure I was under with A-levels looming. He didn't offer a trite "try harder next time," nor did he say it's okay. He pointed to the Greg's Bakery across the high street. "I'm starving. Come grab a sausage roll with me. I hear they're fresh out of the oven." The pastry that day was a bit greasy, but as the warmth settled in my stomach, some of the heaviness in my heart seemed to lift in the gray English afternoon. 2. When we stepped outside after eating, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. He pushed his bike and walked slowly beside me along the pavement. "Leo," I suddenly asked, "why are you so good to me? Is it because of what happened at the beach in Cornwall?" He was taken aback for a moment, then smiled. His eyes looked especially clear in the damp post-rain air. "Eleanor Kemp, I'm nearly 18. Well, almost legally an adult. Anyway, I know the difference between gratitude and liking someone." He stopped in his tracks on the wet pavement, looked at you with utter seriousness and said, "You saving me was the cause, and meeting you was the effect, but being good to you, wanting to see you, worrying about you during exams. These are corollaries under the proposition, I fancy you, not the inevitable conclusions of I'm grateful to you. Understand?" In that moment, I felt a tingling sensation all over, standing there by a bus stop. So, this is what it feels like to be properly confessed to. So, a good relationship isn't about one-sided giving and enduring. It's a back and forth. A mutual recognition. I could feel my cheeks burning fiercely in the cold air. He awkwardly touched my forehead with the back of his cold hand. I should walk you home. You seem to have a temperature." He never officially asked me out then, but I could sense Leo wanted me to focus on my A-levels first. Throughout all this, Arthur noticed every little change in me. For some reason, he started appearing in my line of sight more and more often at college. Leo and I were going over problems in a quiet corner of the library, and Arthur would coincidentally sit behind a nearby bookshelf pretending to read. After college, Leo waited for me by the main gates with his bike. Arthur would walk out with Chloe. Their eyes would meet mine and Leo's, and the air would turn tense. Chloe seemed to have sensed something shifted. She clung to Arthur even more tightly in the corridors, and her temper was getting worse. Once they got into a loud argument during a free period in the common room and were caught red-handed by the head of sixth form. Both were taken out for a talking to and came back looking grim. I kept my head down, working through the practice papers, but my mind kept drifting back to the WhatsApp message from Leo. It's the final stretch now. Just keep your head in the game. You've got the skills. Just do what you normally do. After the last exam, I'll take you to that posh Italian restaurant in town we booked 3 months ago. A sense of fulfillment unlike anything I'd ever felt before washed over me. I was walking step by step toward a future I had never known, solid and bright, a future without Arthur Kemp in it. 6. On the night the A-level exams finally ended, our year group had a party booked in a large private karaoke booth at a pub in the town center. The atmosphere was a long-awaited, carefree relief. The room was filled with the smell of stale lager and cheap cider. Mingling with the cacophony of off-keys singing to Oasis, the clatter of pint glasses, and bursts of laughter. Arthur and Chloe were there, too. They seemed to have made up after their rows. Chloe was sitting beside Arthur, feeding him crisps while he had his arm around her shoulder, occasionally leaning in to whisper something to her amidst the noise. They looked very close, but Arthur's gaze kept drifting over to me almost involuntarily across the crowded room. I was sitting with a few close girlfriends, chatting, playing cards, and occasionally humming along to the music. Leo's class from his maths set was in the next booth. He slipped over halfway through to bring me a glass of lemonade, whispering, "Don't drink too much of the cheap stuff," before hurrying back to his own mates. Chloe's gaze, following Arthur's line of sight, kept fixating on me, making me feel deeply uncomfortable under the flashing disco lights. When I went to the ladies' loose in the middle of the gathering, Chloe followed me in, her heels clicking on the tiled floor. In the mirror, her makeup was flawless. She wore a new season ivory white Reese dress that suited her perfectly. "Eleanor Kemp," she said, not looking at me as she applied lipstick in the mirror. "How were your exams? Do you think your grades will be good enough to apply to the same universities as Arthur? He did quite well on his predictions this time." Her tone carried a natural air of superiority. "Not bad." I pulled out a paper towel to dry my hands, not in the mood to engage in pub toilet drama. "Oh, really?" She turned around, leaning against the sinks, looking me up and down before suddenly smiling. "I heard you've been getting pretty close to that Oxbridge candidate lately." "What? Finally giving up on Arthur?" "Yeah, being clingy is pretty pathetic, isn't it?" I looked up, meeting her gaze calmly in the mirror reflection. "Are you done?" My indifferent attitude seemed to throw her off for a second. She then lifted her chin defiantly. "Arthur is seeing me home tonight in a taxi. We have plans," she winked suggestively. "Grown-up plans. You know what I mean." I gave a nod. "Congratulations," I said dryly, then turned and walked away toward the door. "You?" She clearly hadn't expected that reaction. In a flustered rage, she took a step to follow, but her high heel caught on a cracked tile. And she nearly stumbled, steadying herself on a sink. She watched my retreating back, her gaze suddenly turning sharp and venomous. Suddenly, a sharp shriek came from behind, followed by Chloe's voice, choked with fake tears. The private booth fell silent in an instant as the music cut out, and everyone's eyes were on the two of us standing near the doorway. Chloe shoved past me and rushed to Arthur's side, her hair disheveled on purpose and her eyes red. The expensive rice dress she was wearing had a long tear running from her waist down to the hem, exposing her thigh. Pointing at me, her voice trembling with grievance and rage, she cried, "You Eleanor Kemp cornered me in the ladies." She accused me of stealing Arthur away and she tore my dress. A collective gasp rippled through the smoky room. Every single pair of eyes snapped toward me, some wide with shock, others filled with disbelief, but most simply waiting for the drama to unfold. Arthur took off his own denim jacket and wrapped it around Chloe. He looked at me, his brow furrowed, his gaze conflicted, but it was quickly replaced by a look of weary disgust that said, "I knew it." His voice was laced with suppressed anger. "Eleanor Kemp, what is your problem?" I stood my ground, unmoving by the door. "I thought you had changed, that you'd really let it go since the beach." He suddenly stood up, walked over to me, and looked down at me from his height, his tone full of disappointment and accusation. "So, you were just pretending not to care. You've been faking it all this time. Just to humiliate Chloe in public today." He glanced back at Chloe's torn dress as if he'd found irrefutable proof. "This dress, Chloe told me, is limited edition. You wanted a similar one before for the summer ball, didn't you? You saved up from your Saturday job for a long time only to find out it was already sold out in Topshop and you've been holding a grudge ever since. So when you saw Chloe wearing this today, you were driven mad with jealousy and did this." My heart grew cold in the pub atmosphere. Little by little, yes, in a past life, I did like a similar white dress for a uni ball. What girl hasn't had a little vanity and longing in her youth? I once treated it as a small dream. And on a certain summer night in our garden, blushing, I told it to Arthur, who was still somewhat gentle back then. Back then, I thought sharing secrets was a form of intimacy. It turns out in his hands, all of that could be turned into a weapon to attack me decades later. The booth fell silent. Everyone waiting for my reaction, I raised my hand, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Then, under the watchful eyes of everyone, I turned and walked at a measured pace back to the ladies' room door, lifted my hand, and knocked loudly. Knock, knock, knock. The door opened from the inside immediately. Our form tutor, Mrs. Davies, stepped out with a stern expression. She had been in a cubicle the whole time and had inadvertently overheard the entire exchange. Miss Davies' sharp gaze swept over Chloe, then shifted to Arthur before finally settling on me, softening slightly. She then addressed the whole group of sixth formers. I was in the restroom. I heard every single word Chloe said to Eleanor Kemp, and I clearly heard the sound of her tearing her own skirt fabric. A louder wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the room and instantly all eyes turned toward Chloe. Chloe's face drained of all color, turning deathly pale in an instant under the pub lights. She stared at Mrs. Davies in disbelief. Then at me, her lips trembling, unable to utter a single word in her defense. Arthur froze completely. He looked at Mrs. Davies, then at me, and finally at Chloe's utterly guilty expression. The anger on his face instantly solidified into shock. Meeting his gaze, I spoke calmly. Arthur, what you think has never mattered. It didn't in the past. It doesn't now, and it never will. With that, I stopped looking at anyone, picked up my handbag, gave a polite nod to Mrs. Davies, and walked out of the private booth. I left the hushed whispers of the room and Arthur's guarded stare firmly behind me. The pub's soundproofing wasn't great. From the main bar, the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through. After a moment's thought, I decided not to disturb Leo's gathering next door. I had only taken a few steps out of the hallway towards the exit when I heard the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. Eleanor. Arthur called out as he caught up, his voice slightly breathless, but he wasn't there to apologize. Instead, he demanded, "What did you offer Mrs. Davies? To get her to give false testimony and slander Chloe for you?" I stopped walking near the fruit machine but didn't turn around. The chill in my heart spread all the way to my fingertips. Look, this is Arthur Kemp for you. Even when the truth came crashing down on him, his first instinct was still to defend Chloe and to think the absolute worst of me. Say something. He strode over and blocked my path to the door. His eyes rimmed with red. Whether from anger or the cheap cider, I couldn't tell. You planned this all along, didn't you? You even got a teacher in on it. Do you hate Chloe that much? Do you hate me that much? I looked at his face, the one I had been infatuated with for half my life in suburbia, and felt nothing but exhaustion and profound weariness. Move, I said. Explain yourself, he shot back, not moving an inch. Instead, he grabbed my wrist, a hint of desperation in his grip. What do you want? All this scheming, isn't it just to get my attention again? Well, let me tell you, it won't work. His words died in his throat. As we struggled by the door, I lost my balance on the worn carpet. My foot slipped and my elbow and knee slammed hard into a heavy wooden bar stool. A dull, throbbing pain shot through me, and I gasped sharply. Arthur clearly hadn't expected this. He froze for a second. A flicker of panic and guilt crossing his face. He reached out a hand, intending to help me up. At that very moment, classmates began trickling out of the booth. The party having apparently ended on a sour note. Chloe's eyes immediately landed on Arthur's hand, reaching for me, and my somewhat disheveled state as I sat on the pub floor, her face instantly flooded with panic and hurt. She threw herself into Arthur's arms again, clinging tightly to his waist, and cried out in a choked voice, "Arthur, don't fight her because of me. I'm fine. So what if my dress is torn?" Her voice was sharp and piercing. All the classmates who had been in the dark now thought they understood. Arthur had gotten physical with me for Chloe's sake. Arthur's outstretched hand froze in midair. Caught in an awkward limbo between offering support and withdrawing it, he tried to push Chloe away to explain himself, but she only clung tighter, her sobs growing more desperate for the audience. The other students' gazes turned curious and knowing, and a wave of hushed whispers began to ripple through the crowd by the bar. Watching the look of utter helplessness and frantic anxiety on his face, I found the whole situation utterly absurd. I slowly got to my feet on my own, brushing the dust off my jeans. My elbow and knee ached and my palms were scraped raw from the carpet, the blood glistening clearly under the dim pub lights. I held them up in front of Arthur. "Take a good look. You did this. You were decent to me once in our childhood. Too, fine. This makes us even. We're square now." No one else could grasp my meaning. But Arthur understood across 2 lifetimes. I have now drawn a definitive line between him and me. The color drained from Arthur's face, but the guilt in his eyes was shattered before it could fully form, crushed by the sheer resolve and disgust I displayed. In its place rose a furious, humiliated rage at being publicly shamed in front of his peers, Eleanor Kemp. A vein throbbed at his temple, as he pushed Chloe aside and took a step forward. "You're so noble. You're so impressive. You think you can find happiness with another man. Let me tell you, that's nothing but his momentary gratitude for saving him." Arthur Kemp. A cold, sharp shout cut off his unfinished tirade. Leo strode quickly from the shadows of the hallway nearby. He positioned himself between me and Arthur, blocking his line of sight, then turned and carefully cradled my injured hand in his. After a glance at the grazes, his brow furrowed deeply. "I'm taking you to A&E. Without another word, he gently supported my back with one hand, carefully avoiding my wound with the other, shielding me as he turned and led me away towards the exit. The entire time, he never glanced back at Arthur as if he were nothing more than trash on the side of the road in town. Shielding me, he guided me toward a black cab waiting by the curb outside the pub. Behind us were Arthur's rigid frozen figure on the pavement, Chloe's bewildered sobs, and the complicated gazes of our classmates spilling out onto the street. A night breeze swept through the town center, carrying the first cool hint of the late summer's end. The cut in my palm stung, but a ray of light seemed to pierce the desolation that had settled in my heart for far too long. 7. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor cleaner. The A&E waiting room wasn't crowded on a weeknight. The doctor examined my wounds, just abrasions on my palm and elbow that needed cleaning, disinfecting, and bandaging. I took a pretty hard knock to the knee on that stool. And it's badly bruised. At least nothing's broken. The wound cleaning with iodine stung a bit. I gritted my teeth and didn't make a sound. Leo stayed right by my side the whole time, watching the nurse work. His brow furrowed tight. "Young man, how are you looking after your girlfriend?" The older NHS nurse chided Leo lightly, but pointedly after finishing the bandaging. "That's quite a knock. It's lucky nothing's broken. You'll need to be more careful from now on." Leo didn't offer any excuses. He just lowered his eyes and replied with utter seriousness. "Yes, there won't be a next time." His tone was far too solemn for the situation. The nurse gave him a look and said nothing more. Once bandaged, I walked out of the cubicle into the quiet hospital hallway. Leo went to the vending machine, bought a bottle of Highland spring water, unscrewed the cap, and handed it to me. I took it, sipping slowly. The lukewarm water slid down my throat, soothing the inexplicable tightness I felt there. "Does it still hurt?" he asked quietly. "No," I said, shaking my head. He was silent for a moment, his gaze falling on my hand, which was wrapped in white bandages. "I should have been there sooner," he said, his voice full of self-reproach. "I shouldn't have let you face that alone in the pub." "It's none of your business," I said. "It's my own ill-fated entanglement from the past." The word felt unexpectedly fitting in this context. He fell silent again for a moment under the buzzing fluorescent lights. Then, as if having made up his mind, he turned to look at me with great seriousness. "Eleanor Kemp. Given your usual performance and your estimated grades on the A-levels, your first-choice university is a sure thing," he said, speaking slowly and enunciating each word clearly in his refined accent. "We can go to the same university. Edinburgh." I looked up at him. My reflection was in his dark eyes. And then he paused. His Adam's apple bobbing slightly. "University lasts 4, maybe 5 years in Scotland. We could attend lectures together, spend time in the library together, eat in the refectory together, take walks on the Royal Mile together. After graduation, if you're willing, we can get married. Or if you want to pursue further studies, a master's, I'll be with you. If you want to work in the city, I'll support you. You can do whatever you want." His voice wasn't loud, yet it painted a picture of a future that seemed almost within reach, a very British, stable future. I was just about to reply when I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure at the corner of the staircase near the exit from the corner of my eye. It was Arthur. Perhaps a final shred of remorse lingered, but he dared not step inside the A&E. I mustered my courage and asked again, "Leo, are you being so good to me because I called the Coast Guard when you were at the beach? Do you feel you have no way to repay me so? And so you're offering yourself?" He finished my sentence, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Yet his gaze remained earnest. He shook his head. "Eleanor, let me answer this question for you one more time. I know the difference between gratitude and affection perfectly well. Gratitude is feeling like I owe you a debt of kindness, wanting to be good to you, but affection right here." He gently tapped the spot over his heart over his jumper. "It burns. It's missing you when you're not around during study leave. Feeling happy just seeing you walk into the common room. When you're sad, I feel worse than you do if you're hurt like tonight. I wish I could take the pain for you. It's seeing you stand next to someone else like Arthur and feeling a sour ache here. Getting restless, becoming insecure." He smiled self-deprecatingly, "Just like tonight seeing you hurt. It felt like a knot twisting in my chest. I know you might still need time, that you might not have completely let go of the past with him. That's okay. I can wait. I just wanted to tell you how I feel to lay out the best future I can imagine right in front of you. Take your time choosing, but I have to be one of the options." His words dispelled the last of the shadows and uncertainty in my heart. I believe Arthur heard and took in every single word from the stairwell. I looked at Leo's earnest expression, at his eyes brimming with sincerity and anticipation. In my past life, I was always a blur in Arthur's eyes, an obligation he felt forced to bear in our semi-detached home. But now in Leo's eyes, I see myself clearly cherished, desired, and placed solemnly at the very center of his future. My eyes suddenly grew warm with tears. I sniffed, pushing back the surge of emotion. Then I nodded. It was a slight motion, but firm. "Okay." Leo's eyes instantly lit up, dazzlingly bright in the clinical hallway. The corners of his mouth lifted uncontrollably into a wide, beaming smile. You're saying yes, right?" He still seemed a bit unable to believe it. I smiled too. "Out of all the options, I choose you." He shot to his feet, flustered, and turned in a small, helpless circle on the lino floor before remembering something. Fumbling, he began digging through his jeans pockets. After a moment, he pulled out a small, deep blue velvet box. He took a deep breath and opened the box. Inside were 2 simple platinum rings with tiny characters engraved on the inside. I bought these a while ago in town," he said, his ears tinged with red, though he was trying hard to stay composed. "I was going to wait for your birthday in October. Or, find a more formal occasion like a proper dinner date. But just now, I suddenly felt. It has to be now." He picked up the smaller ring and looked up at me, his eyes full of a questioning, hopeful anticipation. "May I?" I reached out my hand, my fingertips trembling slightly with emotion. He slowly slid the ring onto the base of my ring finger, over the bandage slightly. The fit was perfect. The cool touch of the metal was soon warmed by my body heat. He held my hand, gazing at it for a long moment. Before finally handing me the other ring and offering his own hand, I mimicked his gesture and slipped it onto his finger. The moment the ring was in place, his fingers tightened, enveloping my hand completely in his palm. It was warm, solid, and held with an unmistakable strength. "Leo," I said, looking at our joined hands, the ring on my finger catching a faint glimmer of the fluorescent light. "Will we always be like this?" "Yes," he answered without a moment's hesitation, then drew me gently into his arms in the middle of A&E. It was a restrained yet warm embrace, carrying the scent of antiseptic and his own clean, familiar smell of soap. "I promise." His voice was low and clear, a whisper in my ear. "We'll get through this together." The sound of a nurse calling numbers for prescriptions echoed from down the hall. We pulled apart and shared a knowing smile. I forgot to look at Arthur's reaction by the stairs after that. I couldn't help it. My heart was pounding so hard. There was no room in my world for anyone else. 8. The day the UCAS confirmation letter arrived. The atmosphere at home was like Christmas morning. I got into my first choice university, Edinburgh, just as I had hoped. That prestigious comprehensive university in the north was my choice. Based on my own interests and capabilities, not made to follow in anyone's footsteps. My parents were over the moon, popping a bottle of Prosecco at 11 a.m. Mom immediately wanted to call the grandparents to celebrate. My brother Harry snapped a photo of my acceptance letter and posted it 3 times in a row on his Instagram and Facebook. Each caption bragging about his clever little sister. I was in the living room discussing with my parents whether to go to Scotland early to find accommodation when the doorbell rang. Harry went to answer the door and standing outside on the porch was Arthur. He didn't look well. He had dark circles under his eyes. His stubble was unkempt and he appeared rather haggarded in an old hoodie. He stared straight at me in the living room. "Eleanor, can you come out for a moment?" His voice was strained. The smiles on my parents' faces faded slightly as they exchanged a glance over their tea. Harry blocked the doorway, his tone unfriendly. "Arthur, what do you want now?" "I'm here for Eleanor," Arthur insisted, his gaze fixed on me over Harry's shoulder. I set down the university brochure in my hand, stood up, and walked over. "It's okay, Harry." I walked with Arthur to a quiet spot on the driveway downstairs. The late summer sun was still fierce, baking the tarmac until it was hot to the touch. He turned around, clutching his phone. The screen was lit up, displaying a screenshot of Harry's social media post. His knuckles were white from the strain. "Why?" he asked, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. "Why change your university choice? Eleanor, in our last life, didn't you come with me to Exeter in the south? What era does he think this is? He still believes I'd follow him down south like a lost puppy. Besides, he's already gotten his happy ending with his white moonlight, Chloe. Why should he care where I go? Does he need me there as a backdrop to set the mood for their romance?" I said flatly, "I don't like the south." He was taken aback. "You don't? You never said that in all those years. Didn't I?" I gave a light laugh. "Or did I say it? And you just never paid any attention between rugby pints." "Arthur, during those 4 years in Exeter in my past life, I had terrible hay fever every spring due to the different pollen. I couldn't sleep all night, covered in rashes. The summers were muggy and stifling in the student digs like a steamer basket. In winter, with expensive heating bills, it was colder indoors than out in that damp Victorian terrace. My hands and feet got chilblains so bad I could barely hold a pen to do my essays. With every word I spoke, the color drained further from his face under the English sun. I never complained to him about these details back then. Back then, I believed that for the sake of love, I could endure all these British hardships. Voicing them felt melodramatic. The student canteen food was awful, too greasy. I never got used to it in 4 years. And my stomach was always upset from the cheap takeaways. I couldn't understand some of the lecturers' accents at first, struggled with my major modules, and missed out on so many opportunities because I was miserable. You never noticed any of this, did you? He clenched his jaw. I thought it was a noble sacrifice for love. I shook my head. Now I realize it was just self-indulgent sentimentality, sheer foolishness. So in this life, I'm going to live where I want, in Edinburgh, where the air is crisp and I can breathe easily and live comfortably. Arthur's eyes reddened. It was as if only in this moment did he truly grasp what I had silently endured in my past life for him, and he, as my closest partner for 40 years, had been completely oblivious. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. He repeated over and over on the driveway. I didn't know. I truly didn't know. I thought you were happy doing well down there. Of course, you didn't know. I cut him off. My tone still calm. Because you never wanted to know. That's not true. He tried to defend himself but couldn't form a complete sentence. The marriage that came later in the suburbs was one of gratitude, of duty, anything but love. That truth was now painfully, brutally clear to both of us. It's all in the past now, I said finally, as if delivering a closing statement on a bad business deal. Arthur, I've chosen the path I want to walk. I wish you smooth sailing in the future with Chloe. With that, I turned to leave back to the house, Eleanor. His voice rose sharply, laced with a final desperate struggle and unwillingness to let go of his safety net. Will you regret it, giving up what we had for 2 lifetimes? No, I answered, resolute and unwavering, not looking back. I feel nothing but relief. Relief that Harry is alive. Relief that I woke up in time on that beach. Relief that I was given a chance to choose again. I turned and headed back to the front door, my steps light and brisk. The sun shone down on me, warm and comforting. As I neared the entrance to my house, another figure hurried over from the pavement, carrying several elegant gift boxes from John Lewis and a brand new silver-gray antler suitcase. It was Leo. He was dressed simply in a clean white t-shirt and dark jeans, looking fresh and clean. When he saw me, his eyes immediately crinkled into a smile. I was just about to knock. He approached, glancing at my bandaged hand. Does the wound still hurt? It stopped hurting a long time ago, I said truthfully. Only then did he notice Arthur standing rigidly not far behind me on the drive. His smile faded slightly, but held no hostility or provocation. He simply averted his gaze, as if Arthur were just some insignificant passerby on the street. Are your parents and Harry home? I brought a few things to celebrate. We can take them up together. He gave the gift boxes and his hand a little shake, then pointed at the suitcase. And this one, it's a matching set for university. Mine's the black one. I'll come help you pack before Freshers Week starts. I'm a pro at packing efficiently. His voice was pitched just right, perfectly audible to the person over there. Arthur's body visibly swayed. His gaze was locked on Leo, on the unmistakably paired suitcases in his hand, on the natural intimate ease between him and me, on the completely unguarded, relaxed smile on my face. Then, his gaze fixed on my hand as I reached out to take a gift box. The simple platinum ring on my ring finger caught the afternoon sunlight, reflecting a faint yet piercing glint. He finally understood. It wasn't just about the changed university plans. The person too was completely different. He just stood there watching Leo and me walk into the house, chatting and laughing together about packing strategies. The front door slowly closed, finally shutting out the sight of Arthur standing desolately under the blazing English sun. A figure who looked utterly forsaken by the world on a suburban driveway. Inside the hallway, Leo gently squeezed my hand. The house is warm. My heart is calm. A still pond. A new journey up north is truly about to begin with the right person by my side. 9. The first time Leo officially came to my house for Sunday lunch as my boyfriend. The atmosphere was even better than I could have imagined. My parents were absolutely delighted with him, especially his manners. Harry hit it off with him immediately over football, and the dinner table over the roast lamb was filled with constant laughter. The gifts Leo brought were so thoughtful. A selection of fine teas for Dad, a silk scarf from Liberty for Mum, and a new PS5 controller for Harry. Each one perfectly suited to their tastes. After dinner, Mum suggested I take Leo to my room to relax and have some tea and biscuits. My room isn't large. One entire wall is taken up by an IKEA bookcase crammed full of paperbacks and various bits and pieces. Leo looked around with keen interest, as if exploring a fascinating treasure trove in a museum. He pulled out a photo album from my childhood and flipped through it, chuckling at my silly younger self in school plays. Then he picked up a little knickknack from a holiday in Cornwall from my shelf and asked about its story until his gaze finally settled on the very top shelf of the bookcase. In a rather inconspicuous corner, a simple wooden photo frame was propped there at an angle, its back facing out to hide the image. Being tall, he reached out and took it down. When he turned it over, the smile on his face faltered slightly. It was that photo from when I was 4 in the garden. I was sitting on a swing holding a melting ice lolly. While Arthur leaned in next to me, trying to lick the back of my hand, the sunlight was warm, and the expressions on both children's faces were innocent and naive. Leo stared at the photo for several seconds, then gently placed it face down on the desk. He didn't say a word, just took my hand, lowered his head, and gave the tip of my index finger a firm, deliberate bite. A sharp sting shot through me. Ouch, I hissed, pulling my hand back. What are you, a dog? Woof, he replied, looking up at me. His eyes were dark, tinged with a hint of hurt. I'm jealous. He pointed at the face-down photo. I hate that I wasn't your childhood sweetheart living next door. That I wasn't part of your past in this village. That picture, it's really grating on me. Seeing his undisguised jealousy, my heart softened a little. I was rather touched by such frank concern. That was all a long time ago. From now on, we'll just make new memories to overwrite the old ones. His expression cleared slightly as he moved closer to hug me in the small room, resting his chin on my shoulder and saying in a muffled voice, "You're right. We'll take photos every year from now on. At university, on holidays. Lots of them. Until the album is full." We held each other quietly for a while. I could sense he still had something more to say. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. "You've seemed a bit distracted since we started eating lunch." Leo's body stiffened. He let go of me, and his expression grew hesitant and serious. He pulled out his phone, tapped it a few times, and held it out for me to see this. "I've been hesitating for days, unsure if I should show you." It was a video recorded on a phone, the background, a noisy Wetherspoons pub. In the center of the video, Chloe sat with a few other stylishly dressed guys and girls, swirling a gin and tonic glass in her hand and laughing loudly. A guy's booming voice cut through the background noise. "Chloe, are you and that Arthur guy for real? I heard you two were going to die for love at the beach." Chloe snorted with derision and rolled her eyes dramatically. "Die for love, my arse. I just lost a bet. People are always saying Arthur is head over heels for me since year 7. Right. So, I bet someone a tenner that he'd even jump into the North Sea if I told him to. Who knew he'd actually do it? He almost got himself killed. What an idiot." Another girl chimed in with a laugh over her cider. "So, after he found out you weren't really serious about the double suicide pact, how did you two make up?" Chloe, you curled her lip disdainfully. "He was so easy to reel in. I didn't even need bait. Training him was like training a spaniel. Just a little treat, and he'd come wagging his tail, but it's getting annoying now. He's clingy, sticks to me like glue, and I can't shake him off. I should have known better than to take the joke this far." The video ended there. I held the phone, silent for a long moment in my bedroom. The sound of wind and waves at the seashore, along with Arthur's bitter, hate-filled last words on his deathbed came rushing back through my mind once more. So, that's how it is. The so-called suicide pact. The so-called unrequited love that haunted him for a lifetime from start to finish. It was nothing but a cruel joke, a foolish wager in a pub. The great love that Arthur clung to across 2 lifetimes, for which he resented Harry, resented me, wasted his own life and trapped mine in suburbia. It turns out to be so fragile, so utterly laughable, I can't quite describe what I'm feeling. Part of me wants to laugh out loud. And part of me feels a profound sorrow for Arthur and for my own life, if that was pointlessly sacrificed for 40 years. Leo, I took a deep breath and handed the phone back to him. Are you afraid that if I see this, I'll feel sorry for him, that I'll go back to him out of pity? Leo looked at me, his eyes filled with worry and nervousness. I don't know. I was afraid you'd be upset after all. You two shared such a long history in this town. I shook my head and took his hand in mine. His palm was warm and dry. I won't go back. I looked at him and said earnestly, Leo, I'm upset, not because I still care for him romantically, but because I feel the past wasn't worth it, and that's all there is to it. As for this video, I paused. Let's just pretend we never saw it. Whether his obsession is real or imagined, whether his white moonlight, Chloe, is an angel or a ghost, it's none of my business anymore. He chose this path, and he can live with the consequences. Leo's tense shoulders finally relaxed. He gripped my hand in return, his hold a bit too tight. It's my fault, he said quietly. I shouldn't have let my imagination run wild. It's just sometimes I get scared. Scared of what? You're just too good for me. I'm afraid I can't hold on to you, he said, revealing a vulnerable side I rarely saw. I'm afraid you'll compare us. Afraid you'll think. After all, he was your childhood sweetheart. Leo, I interrupted him, raising our clasped hands so he could see the matching platinum rings. Look, these represent our present and our future in Edinburgh and beyond. That I pointed at the face-down photo album on the desk is just dust from the past. A good relationship isn't one free from insecurity and fear of loss. I said, looking at him earnestly. It's one where even with those fears, you still choose to trust. And you're willing to work together to minimize the chance of ever losing each other. I used to get criticized all the time by Arthur. He'd say I was too clingy, too insecure in our marriage. Now I understand. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that the other person wasn't right. A sense of security is something two people build together. I leaned in close to Leo, gently touching my forehead to his. Let's work together to give each other enough security. Leo didn't say a word. He just gently kissed my lips in the quiet room. 10 for our pre-university trip. Leo and I went to see the Lake District and hiked the peaks I'd always wanted to visit. On the day of our return to my parents' house, the train was delayed due to leaves on the line and it was already late at night by the time I got home in a taxi. My parents were still up waiting for me with tea. We chatted for a while about the trip and had a late-night snack of toast. After I took a shower, I noticed my mother seemed to be holding something back. What's wrong, Mum? Well, Arthur came by this evening. Mum sighed over her mug. He waited in the living room for a long time and only left when it was clear you weren't coming back on the last train. He didn't look well at all. He's become terribly thin. He insisted he had to speak with you in person. I didn't promise him anything. Just said you were traveling up north and your return date was uncertain. My hand, which was drying my hair with a towel, paused for a moment before I resumed naturally. I see. What was bound to happen would happen. I just hadn't expected him to find out the truth about Chloe so quickly. Sure enough. The doorbell rang again the next afternoon. Arthur's face was pale and haggarded with sunken eyes. He looked even worse than my mother had described. I opened the door but didn't let him in. Instead, I stepped out onto the porch and closed the front door behind me. We stood in the drafty English afternoon. He held up his phone with shaking hands. The screen showed a screenshot of a WhatsApp group chat log dense with text. I glanced at it and saw a conversation where Chloe and her friends were making fun of Arthur in explicit terms. It corroborated the video content Leo had shown me from the pub. Chloe, she made a bet with someone. She was playing me for a fool. His eyes were bloodshot and red from crying. His voice choked with a sob of utter devastation. There was never any suicide pact at the beach. She's been lying to me the whole time since school. Making a fool out of me. I'm such an idiot. For 2 lifetimes. 2 lifetimes I've been a complete fool in this village. He sank to a crouch on the porch tiles, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders heaved violently as he let out a raw, animalistic sob of pain. It was the despair of having one's entire belief system shattered, of having one's whole life rendered meaningless. He wept for a long time before he could finally lift his head, his face streaked with tears, a picture of utter misery. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a regret I had never seen before in 40 years. "Eleanor, I was wrong. I was truly wrong." He stammered incoherently. "I regret it. I regretted it. Even in my past life on my deathbed, I just didn't dare admit it. In this life, I regret it even more. I shouldn't have treated you like that at the pub." He pulled a crumpled sorry voucher from his pocket. The one I had written for him when we were children after I broke his toy car. I didn't pick it up. He clutched desperately at my jeans leg like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. "Come back, please, Ellie. I don't care about what happened between you and Leo. I don't. Just come back and we can start over. I swear I'll treat you right this time. I'll make it up to you for everything. I'll give you everything I have." His gaze was a mix of abject desperation and feverish intensity, tinged with an unhealthy obsession. I waited for him to calm down a little on the porch before speaking slowly. "Arthur, I don't want a fish from someone else's pond, nor a dog trained by another master, as Chloe put it." He flinched violently at her words. "In our past life, I tried to make it work. Some things just can't be tamed." I continued. "Remember that photo album at the very bottom of your study desk drawer in our old house? The one disguised with a boring gardening book cover. You thought I never went through your things, but I saw it long ago when cleaning. I thought you were nostalgic for your youth at first. It was only later I realized you were nostalgic for her. Every year without fail, you'd fly to Australia twice using all your holiday leave. You told me it was because you loved the Gold Coast beaches, and I believed you like a fool. It wasn't until right before you died that I found out it was because Chloe had emigrated to Melbourne. You flew there just to be in the same city, to glimpse the world she lived in from afar. But my body at least was faithful to you for 40 years. I didn't waver in the slightest. I didn't know you carried someone else in your heart the whole time. If I had known, I wouldn't have been so foolish as to trap you for a lifetime in a loveless marriage. A clean, dignified breakup back then, letting us both find our own happiness. Wouldn't that have been better? But you kept it hidden. You played the part of the devoted husband repaying a debt to my family, all while preserving your spiritual chastity for her across the ocean. And in the end, on your deathbed, you still believed Harry and I used that debt to shackle you, to ruin your life. Arthur, don't make yourself out to be some kind of martyr now." I leaned in slightly, looking him in the tear-filled eye. "You're not wanting to stay in this marriage in the past just out of some sense of obligation. It's because you know I'm the most suitable wife for you. I'm sensible, low maintenance. I can hold your family together, take care of your aging parents, and let you keep up the act of the devoted husband in the community, wallowing in your own self-pity about your lost love. This was a calculated choice you made, not a sacrifice." He slumped further onto the floor tiles, looking up at me, his lips trembling as he tried to form a rebuttal, but he realized every single word I'd said was the brutal, unvarnished truth about our past life. As for now, I straightened up, gazing at the bright, rare English sunshine outside the porch. It's only with Leo that I finally learned what real love is supposed to feel like. True love isn't about one-sided sacrifice or enduring hardship in silence, nor is it about living in someone else's shadow. It's about mutual recognition and nourishment. Two people coming together and becoming the best versions of themselves. I averted my gaze, letting it fall upon his ashen face. "Arthur, don't come looking for me again. Your regrets, your tears, they mean nothing to me now. I want to love someone who was good from the start, like Leo, not someone who only became decent after a belated awakening brought on by trauma. What was between us ended long ago. The moment we spent 40 years clinging to a lie. And the moment I heard the resentment in your voice on the beach in this life, saving you was never my intention. So we owe each other nothing." I finished speaking, turned away without another glance, and went back inside the house. From behind me came Arthur's broken sobs on the porch, followed by the sound of my dad and Harry forcibly hauling him away off the property. The heavy front door closed with a final thud. That chapter of the past, so full of resentment and desolation in suburbia, was finally over. The days slipped by in a flash. Leo and I went to Edinburgh University together, just as he had described in A&E. We attended lectures together, spent hours in the massive university library, debated over which student union bar had the best cheap pints, and strolled down the plain tree-lined paths of the meadows in autumn, crunching through fallen leaves in our boots. He studied economics and management, while I majored in English literature. We each worked hard in our own fields, yet shared every joy and worry with one another over coffee. We would debate over the solution to a problem and be moved together by the plot of a film at the local cinema. He dragged me to enter a university startup competition, and I'd pull him along to see plays at the Fringe Festival and art exhibitions. A good relationship truly nourishes the soul. I became more outgoing and confident in seminars, while he grew more steady and understanding. We are like two stars orbiting each other, shining in our own paths, yet forming a more stable system because of each other's gravity. After graduating from university with good degrees, he took over part of his family's business in London. It was a hectic start in the city, but he was full of drive. I went on to do a master's degree, renting a small flat near campus where I got a rescue cat and a dog. Life gradually settled into the rhythm of small, concrete details. On weekends, we'd go grocery shopping at Waitrose together, debating whether to have a Sunday roast or homemade curry for dinner. In the evenings, we'd take the dog for a jog in the nearby park, watching the pale sunset stretch our shadows long on the grass. When I pulled all-nighters writing my dissertation, he'd bring me warm milk and cut-up fruit. If he came home late from a business dinner in the city, I'd leave a lamp on in the hallway and have some toast ready for him, ordinary and mundane, yet brimming with a profound sense of British happiness. In the third year after graduation, we got married. The wedding was simple at a lovely registry office. With only our closest family and friends in attendance, when we exchanged rings, we both laughed because our ring fingers already bore the simple platinum tokens from each other from years ago. A few more years passed, and our two families, the Yates and ours, had a rare reunion to go skiing in the French Alps for the new year. By then, Leo and I had already traveled through over a dozen countries together on various holidays and were planning our next adventure, a trip to Antarctica. Arthur arrived as well, accompanied by his wife, a woman I didn't know, and a little boy of about 3 or 4. His wife seemed gentle and quiet, speaking little English, and was focused on looking after the child. Arthur had changed a great deal, barely in his 30s. He already had flecks of gray at his temples, and his eyes held a lingering gloom and weariness. I heard through the grapevine that he and Chloe had maintained a long-distance relationship for a while when she went to university, but it didn't last long. Soon after Chloe went abroad to Australia, she found someone new. Refusing to accept defeat, he followed her abroad only to get beaten up by her new boyfriend in a bar and end up in the hospital for a long time. After returning home to England, he fell into a deep depression, neglected his studies, barely passed his degree, and landed a mediocre job through family connections. Later, he got married through a matchmaking arrangement his parents set up. At the dinner table in the ski chalet, the adults were chatting over wine. Arthur's wife was carefully feeding their child, who was being a bit fussy with the food. Leo and I were sitting on the other side. He was quietly discussing a minor issue with his ski boot binding with me, saying we should get it adjusted at the rental shop tomorrow. We were sitting very close, our posture intimate and natural. Arthur's gaze kept drifting over at me, at Leo, at our hands clasped together on the wooden table, at the unspoken understanding in our exchanged smiles. His wife seemed to notice. She lowered her head and quietly wiped her child's mouth. The next day was free time. Leo and I skied hard all morning, then had hot chocolate with brandy on the terrace outside the mountain restaurant at noon. At some point, Arthur walked over, a cigarette between his gloved fingers. "Eleanor, can we talk alone for a minute?" he asked, his voice sounding a little strained in the cold air. Leo glanced at me, and I nodded. He patted my shoulder in my ski jacket and stood up. "I'm going to check out the new snowboards in the shop over there," he said, giving us space, but not going far, stationing himself somewhere he could still see us clearly. Arthur sat down opposite me on the wooden bench, lit a cigarette, and took a deep drag. The smoke curled upwards in the crisp, cold alpine air. A long silence followed. "You all seem well," he finally spoke, looking at the mountains. "Yes, we are," I admitted frankly. He fell silent again, his gaze piercing through the haze, fixed on the endless snow-capped peaks and the azure sky behind me. "Mimi," He suddenly uttered the name, his voice soft and trembling. My hand holding the hot chocolate cup paused ever so slightly. Mimi, our daughter from our past life. She was sweet, sensible, and had 2 dimples when she smiled. Do you miss her? He asked, his gaze turning back to fix intently on me. I thought for a moment in the cold air and answered honestly. I do sometimes very much. A faint glimmer flickered in his eyes. But she deserves to grow up in a home with more love than we had, I continued, my tone calm. Leo and I aren't planning on having children for now. We have travel plans for over a dozen countries we want to experience together first. If we ever do have a child, it will be a completely new life, a whole new story, not a replacement for anyone from the past. The light in Arthur's eyes went out completely. He tugged at the corner of his mouth as if trying to smile, but it didn't quite form, leaving only bitterness. Yeah, a whole new story, he murmured, taking another drag of his cigarette. The smoke blurred his expression. As long as you're happy, you too, I said. Be good to your wife and your child now. He gave a slight start but said nothing. Just crushed out his cigarette in the ashtray with a sharp final motion. I should go, I said, getting to my feet in my ski boots. He nodded, not looking up at me. I turned and walked towards Leo near the shop. He immediately came forward to meet me, taking my gloved hand and tucking it naturally into his warm ski jacket pocket. Are you cold? He asked. Not at all. We walked away side by side, heading for the cable car station to go back up. After we had gone a long way, I glanced back over my shoulder. Arthur remained seated there on the terrace, motionless, like a statue frozen in time. Snowflakes began to fall again, swirling thick and fast around the mountain. Through the thickening curtain of snow and the wispy haze, his figure grew blurred and solitary, gradually merging with the vast white landscape. It was as if his life, too, had long been trapped in a self-inflicted winter from which there was no escape. And I, with my hand held tightly by the person beside me, was walking toward a bright and sunny spring back in England.